This movie is on another aspect of data validation. Data validation messages. When you set up a data validation, you need to tell people what it is that you require them to do. First, we're going to take a look at setting up a validation that accepts any value, and why would you do that? And then we're going to look at the input message that you can provide people with. You can also set up an error message that has an alert style setting where you have one of three choices. It's informational, it's a warning, or it's a full stop. It'll prevent them from being able to enter the content they're trying to enter into the cell. And then if you have an alert style, you should also have an alert message set up. So you may have noticed on the last movie when we were setting up data validations that one of the options, and I'm going to go to it now, left-click the Data tab, in the Data Tools group, Data Validation, left-click Data Validation. The default choice is to allow any value. Now, why the heck would you do that? Why would you set up a data validation that doesn't prevent anybody from entering anything they want to into the cell? Well, the reason why you would do that is if you want to provide some kind of message to somebody, and I'm going to set up an input message. The default is to show input message when cell is selected. I can have a title, and then I can put in a message. When I get done typing the content of the message and defining the title, if I want a title, left-click OK, and you'll get what sort of looks like a tooltip display every time the cell is selected. I can click off of it, click back to it, and I'll get that message again. And I can actually also move the message if it gets in the way of somebody doing something else. That can be moved. So that's why you would use input any value as a validation rule. But these messages serve a bigger purpose. I have a validation rule set up in C5. I can't see the rule, but when I enter some content into C5 that doesn't fall within the guidelines of the rule, Control Enter, I'll get the standard error message. The value you entered is not valid. A user has restricted values that can be entered into this cell. Well, how helpful is all of that? Not very. All I know is I can't enter a 5, but I don't know what I can enter. I'm going to cancel out of that, and we're going to set up an error alert. Left-click the Data Validation Command button, Data Validation, and the dialog box is on Input Message, which is where we were when we last closed this dialog box. So I'm going to put an input message, and after typing my input message, I'm going to left-click OK, and I'm able to provide this information to the person that's entering content into this cell, and that message will display every time I make C5 the active cell. I'm going to go down to C6, and we'll set up another message, only this time, maybe I don't want an input message. Sometimes those input messages can become a little annoying, and maybe I feel like I don't need to constantly remind people every time they click on the cell, whatever it is that they need to put in the cell, the valid content. But I do want to make sure if they get it wrong, what the valid entry would be. So to do that, you can set up an error alert. There's a checkbox that says Show Error Alert after invalid data is entered. I'm not sure why you would set up an error alert and then not have it be displayed when somebody tried to enter some invalid data, but you could do that. There's 3 different alert levels. On the drop-down, they're called alert styles. We can prevent somebody from entering invalid data completely. They will not be able to enter invalid data if you select Stop. We can provide a warning message, which will enable them to make a choice as to whether they want to enter the otherwise invalid data, or we can just provide them with some information if they enter some invalid data. Functionally, there's not a lot of difference between the warning style and the information style. In either case, somebody can actually enter whatever they want to in the cell. But these error messages carry with them an icon that expresses a level of severity, so you may want to tone it down from a warning to just be informational, unless you feel it's more critical than that. So what do these look like? I'm going to set up 3. This one is going to be a stop, and I'm going to say stop. Left-click OK. I'm going to try to input some invalid data. Control Enter. And I get the message that I put in there, which was stop. I'll cancel. We'll go back to data validation. And instead of stop, we'll put a warning. And you already see what's going to be displayed. Okay, again, invalid data. I get a warning. Now I get an option to continue or not. I can cancel. I'm going to cancel that and go back and set up the third style, which is informational. You already see the icon is going to be displayed, and once you set up the title and the error message, that content will be displayed as well. I'm going to cancel out of that and arrow down. And there's one thing I want to show you about when you have a validation that references a list. We get a little drop-down arrow, and I get a list of the 3 shipping methods that are valid entries for this cell, and I can arrow among them. And if this list was long, I'd get a scroll bar, and I'd be able to scroll up and down. I'll escape out of that. But you don't have to use the mouse to get the drop-down list. You can press Alt-down arrow and get the same list. And then I can arrow to choose whatever it is that I want to establish as the shipping method, and then enter. And I've chosen U.S. Post Office. So those are the data validation messages. We started by looking at a data validation that allows any value to be entered into the cell. We explored why we would actually do that. We set up an input message. We looked at the 3 alert styles that we can establish for the error message, and we set up some error messages.